Greetings, YouTube. I apologize for the lighting. I have a cat using me as a pillow. There's a great video I once saw. I think it was originally put up on YouTube, but I encountered it on some blog somewhere. In it, a little girl, a toddler, able to walk and talk, but just barely, is being asked to help clear the table after dinner. A reasonable task. All she's being asked to do is move her bowl and spoon to the sink. Good task building process. Cooperation, things like that. Part of the process, Simple task. She doesn't want to do it. Also, not shocking, she's a toddler. There's a great joke that says, reasons my toddler cried today, his sleeves are too long. Reasons my toddler cried tomorrow, his sleeves are too short. Could be anything. And her excuse for not moving the bowl and spoon is that it's too heavy. It's just too heavy. And the father is very reasonable, very pleasant about it. And he's just not buying it. He knows she's moved a bowl before. The bowl is not too heavy. But she's bought herself into this frame of reference. So now she's stuck. If she admits she's wrong, well, that's, a blow against the ego. So she has to pretend the bowl is heavy. So she does. And so she's carries it a foot, collapses to the ground. Struggles to her feet, travels a couple more feet, collapses to the ground. All the while screaming and wailing that it's too heavy, it's too heavy, it's too heavy. Until she finally gets to the sink, heaves it up, and puts it in the sink, and then collapses on the floor in absolute hysterics. Now, there isn't anything that the parent really could have done at this time to make that any different, because his daughter had trapped herself. She'd got herself in her own personal paradox. To admit that she was wrong would be painful. To continue the charade is painful, but slightly less painful than admitting she was wrong. So she just went along with it, even though she knew it was an act, even though she knew it was absurd. And that conflict inside her was ramping up until it resulted in full-blown meltdown. We'll leave aside the fact that perchance, the father should not have taped this and then released it to the internet, but that's beside the point. That same kind of feedback loop is apparently what's going on inside the minds of people who are opposed to vaccines for their children. Because they've discovered, now linked to an article, that different methods of attempting to help explain to parents why they need to get vaccines to their children and how they're useful and save lives are failing. That the different methods they're trying to convince them not only are failing to convince them, but is driving up their bias even more firmly. That they're becoming more deeply entrenched in this very frame of mind and reference that the researchers are trying to move them away from. Trying to move them towards the idea that giving vaccines to your children is not only the best possible thing you can do for your child, but for the community at large. Because people have died because other people's kids weren't vaccinated. Even though those unvaccinated kids have not died, they have spread disease that have killed innocent people. Sometimes it kills the elderly. Sometimes it's going to affect the young who haven't had their vaccines yet for a number of reasons. They're too young. They're from places that didn't have vaccines. They're newly introduced to the Americas. Sometimes people have compromised immune systems. I'm one of those. I'm diabetic. It compromises my immune system. Though I take supplements for it, I take a lot longer to knock down colds and things than most people do, and that I did prior to being diabetic. I'm on my 3rd week of a sinus problem. It's almost gone. This is a problem I would have knocked out of the way, in 7-8 days before. Not anymore. And these people that aren't vaccinating their children are putting people like me and babies and the elderly at risk. Not just at risk, people are actually dying. All because of falsehoods. All because of lies. All because of myths and urban legends that have nothing to do with the reality. But people have invested themselves in them, and so now they're trapped. And it's a bit of a mystery how we get them untrapped. How we open up their minds so that they can see what they're doing is not only bad for their own child, but for the community at large. And it's a real conundrum. And there are lots of people in the world that aren't helping because they're fueling the confusion and the ignorance. They're fueling the myths and the urban legends. And we need to stop that. And I'm not sure that at the moment we know how. And it's not as funny as a little kid picking up a heavy bowl. It's killing people.